Well, Sunday is no longer coming.
Sunday not come again. Sunday is here.
Sunday is here. And today we have another prodigy in our hands.
Right. When they talk about, you hear them say in the horse racing thing, you know, you used to listen to Chris Salmon and Cayman and Spark, and they say, you know, there are certain types of races where for big ass, you hear them say big ass run certain races. Well, today we have one of those races.
Yeah, Richie, when you look at BB Seaton, it's like you're walking down the road and you're dropping in a hole. But you don't realize how big the hole is until somebody probably take a drone and do an overhead view. That is the footprint of BB Seaton, you know, when it comes to Jamaican music.
Absolutely, absolutely. The music is BBC, and today we're gonna feature his catalog, his work, his contribution to Jamaica's music. I think one of the nicest way to get that started is to run a couple pieces, and then we're gonna. All right, but in the meantime, as we think, BB Seaton was born in Kingston, 1944. Is that right?
Yeah, man, 1944.
1944, 3rd of September man.
It's a September coming
And
up. Virgo man.
Yes, September. Yes, Virgo.
Good man.
Yeah.
Chairman of the Virgo person.
Yeah,
A
man,
trim comes Virgo man.
My ex-wife would have said the same thing too. Yes, educated at Rollington Town, second Rollington Town School, Vast Prep, Wentworth High School, Northwestern Academy, and Cornwall College. I mean, a Cornwall College man. Yeah? And got in the music business in the early 1960s, and we're just trying to correct a little audio glitch here we're having, so we can bring Mr. Seaton back online. But got in the business in the early 1960s, and Garth, you and I had this conversation earlier this week, where when we looked at the 1960s, it was easily the golden years of Jamaican music, particularly as it relates to the rocksteady era, 1966, 67, 68, in particular 67.
And I can tell you, 67 and 68 was almost like a unheralded year when it comes to the music. When I go through Jamaican music, the amount of music, rocksteady that was produced between 67 and 68 is, let me tell you, Richie. And those songs were not just songs that just, you know, were songs, but they were hits, big hits.
Yeah, almost every one of these songs that we touched, they were hits in their own right.
Yeah, Freedom Street was a phenomenal hit.
And again, Freedom Street is a song, in fact, that song
it was covered by different artists too.
Right. But the song itself too is kind of very applicable at this time. I mean, we became independent 60 years ago. We basically earned our wings, if you will. Freedom Street, we're now walking on our own. We're responsible for ourselves. And, you know, a good revisit, if you ask me, God, because, you know, we're celebrating and we want to look at what's the next 60 years going to look like. And, you know, that our creative people, in my opinion, have to take a significant role in the Jamaica that is going to be presenting itself over the next 60 years.
Especially coming from the shoulders that they've been standing on for the past. Because when you look at people like Delroy Wilson, Ken Booth, BB Seaton, you know, different producers like Duke Reed, you know, Coxsone Dodd,
Bonnie Lee,
Channel One, Hooking Brothers, Beverly's Records. It is amazing. It's an amazing legacy to have. And that's one of the reasons why we haven't even touched on any new artists yet. We're focusing on the legacy that is there, because this foundation is huge.
I think it is important that, you know, we need to understand where our music is coming from. Now, BB Seaton had essentially there a couple of stages to his own career. There is his singing career, which began in the, again, early 1960s. You touched on two pieces of work there's a fire, which was a piece he wrote for Ken Booth.
Yes.
And then you also...
Well, Freedom Street is one that you wrote for Ken Booth.
Sorry, Freedom Street.
And then there's a fire, the Gay Lads.
By the Gay Lads. The Gay Lads, though, was comprised what? Initially, there were 3 of them, and then I think it ultimately boiled down to himself and Delano Stewart, who himself, too, was a good vocalist
Yes.
with a reasonably impressive solo career, and quite a few of the pieces that Delano Stewart produced came from the pen of B.B. Seaton as well. But we want to look at, first of all, you know, the work that he did. Remember, I told you, he wrote songs for people like Marcia Griffiths, wrote songs for Dennis Brown,
Delroy Wilson,
The Chosen Few, Freddie McGregor, Yaawd, UB40,
Ras Obi,
Jimmy London, the Melodians, the Uniques, which featured people like Slim Smith.
Yes.
Slim Smith and Cornell Campbell, Roddy Thomas, Winston Francis, and so on and so forth. So, you know, a pretty extensive list. Is almost like, what's his name?
Bob Andy?
No, a harmonica man.
You mean Charlie Organier?
Charlie Organier. Yeah, man, them say if Charlie never played for your music, you wasn't a singer at that time. And you could almost say the same thing here, that, you know,
because he found himself in the halls of Studio One.
Absolutely.
He worked with Tip Top Records, which part of Duke Reed.
Yep. Right.
So before this, we played ABC Rocksteady. It's Hard to Confess. Those 2 songs are by the Gay Lads. And then we played Lady with a Starlight, Ken Booth, Delroy Wilson's Mash Up Illiteracy, and again, the Gay Lads, and It's All in the Game, produced in 1970.
Well, here's my thing in terms of an approach, because
but
we want to look
Richie,
at
It's All in the Game was Tommy Edwards, I think, and then covered by the Gay Lads.
Yes, Tommy Edwards. What I want to look at is, let's look at, because the Gay Lads and Seaton's solo work were, you know, they're at different points. Some of the work was done as solo work, but and then there's another point at which they were working together as the Gay Lads. The 1960s was a crucial period in terms of Jamaican music. 66, 67, we started down the road of rocksteady
coming out
music.
of ska.
You know, the ska had started to fade. The music slowed down a little bit, and we were seeing a lot more of the music that was coming from North America, having an even bigger influence. Where we were taking songs like
It's All in the Game,
yeah,
which was pioneers 1958, and then I think Benny King did a version of it, and the Gay Lads, of course,
did some rework. So what we want to do, let's take a more hardcore look at the Gay Lads catalog, right? And we carry the conversation with it. Unfortunately. All right. Yes, Garth. We were talking off camera, but we're back, and today we're featuring the work of B.B. Seaton, singer, songwriter, producer. B.B. Seaton has a wealth of time that he spent with the Gay Lads,
yes,
and
60 years in the music business.
60 years in the music business, and a really, really massive catalog. And so today, what we want to do, we were, you know, of course, we're trying to get him on the program, but we're having some technical difficulties. We're just gonna have to do our own workaround and work with the material that we have on him. 1960s, Jamaica is just coming out of the eggshells, if you will, right? The country had just become independent, 1962, and around that time, the music was more ska. We played a little piece of work that the Chipmunk ska.
And a little bit of a hybrid, Richie, between rocksteady ska, which was that Stop Making Love Beside Me.
Absolutely. Well, Stop Making Love was more
It's right in between.
It's an in-between song. As you say, my man from Trinidad who had made that argument, Lynn Tate, that you have slow ska, fast ska.
Well, slow soca, fast soca, but we had
one speed with ska. And eventually the ska slowed down. Again, it just depends on who the authors of the music were. And Seaton was one of those who was at the helm, if you will, of the music. Now, at the time, by the time we get into that second half of the 1960s, Studio One would now have been established. Coxsone would have set up his Studio One enterprise. Of course, Treasure Isle around the corner at Bond Street with Duke Reid, and to a lesser extent,
Prince Buster, Voice of the People,
right, and as well as the Beverly's boys, Leslie and Leslie Kong and his brother would have been things. So those are basically the big four, if you will. But at the time, while
of course, you had West Indian.
West Indian Records was more on the distribution side because they did a little bit of recording. In fact, some of Seaton's work was also recorded there, but of course the primary record producing outlet would have been Federal Records at the time. But the music by mid 1960s was now rock steady, and this is where Seaton came into his own. Not only as a vocalist, we know he was writing songs for other people as well. But I really want us to look at, because the Yaawd's catalog, there's a couple of tunes. Joy in the Morning. Joy in the Morning was a massive rock steady hit. I think Alton Ellis had revisited that song with his group Alton and the Fabulous Flames. But Seaton had basically hit the ground with this song.
And this is also a song produced by Sonia Pottinger.
Right.
With the Treasure Isle.
On the Treasure Isle.
Or Tip Top label.
Absolutely.
High Note, whichever one.
But
I can't tell you specifically about that.
No, because High Note was her. Remember, she ultimately bought the Treasure Isle catalog. And she bought Duke Reid's entire catalog, which included the Treasure Isle label and the Duke Reid label. But Lady Joy in the Morning, and then they went on and did another song, Lady with the Red Dress On. And I think what we want to do is sample a couple of those songs, and we come right back.
Yeah, boy, this man just has a magic touch. Almost every single song.
The man voice coming like gold, man. You're absolutely right. Every song one of the songs that you listen to that song, Accept My Apology. That was him going solo. A pretty nice song.
Even though the Yaawds at the time were doing backup for him.
Yes, but this was still, that, and again, that was a feature of the team. Remember that a couple of weeks ago we had Charlie Organ and Roy Panton, and they talked about that they basically helped each other out in the studio. Anybody who was in the studio at the time
harmonized.
And nothing for them harmonized on a tune. And essentially, Seaton took the decision in 1972. I guess everybody did them turn with Coxsone, and we want to talk about that as well too. And in the next hour, we look at his role with Coxsone as the A&R man. But Accept My Apology was a solo effort, if you will. He had a pretty impressive solo career as well, putting out a few what we call lick over tunes. He did over Bill Withers' Lean on Me, the Persuaders' big tune, A Thin Line Between Love and Hate, Sweet Caroline. We did that with My Jamaican Girl, and then he also did this song which was a standard for us in Jamaica, Born Free. But as he said, Garth, a big voice, a man who, it essentially was a man for the times. And here is a man who had basically done his rounds with the respective studios because he was not afraid to put his foot out there and to try to find his own. And of course that is kind of natural. If you work with Coxsone over time, there are two things will happen to you with Coxsone. He's not going to pay you.
Or not pay you enough.
Or not paid you enough. But the general rule is that you farm your teeth and then you step out.
Cut out
and ultimately that is what he did. And if you ask me, I believe that he gave a pretty good account of himself as a solo artist.
Yeah, but before we even touch the solo artist, you did call the name of one, I think, in my opinion, Gay Lads, apart from ABC Rocksteady, the biggest song, which became an anthem, and is a song wherever you go across the planet. If you have any Jamaican woman in the audience and you play this song, you have to get a forward. You must get a very good response. In the 70s, this song was played over and over and over again. Every jukebox, every party, radio stations. This song, which heralded the virtues of a Jamaican woman.
Listen, there was a thing about Rocksteady, and as because again, although the Rocksteady era was a very short era, it still influenced a lot of the reggae music that subsequently followed. The music was it catered to the ladies, it celebrated our women. But again, I have to agree with you, Garth, that this is a Jamaican woman's anthem, this particular song, My Jamaican Girl. And it demonstrated again the kind of the depth of B.B. Seaton's writing. It also showed a certain kind of maturity in his music. If you look at a lot of the songs that came from his pen, there was I don't know of a song that you would classify as a derogative song. Eh?
Let me see, we have about a little bit more than an hour left in the show. And if I played the rest of the songs we did the Gay Lads already and everything. But when you look at songs that he wrote for Ken Booth,
Yes.
You're talking about Freedom Street, Lady with a Starlight. You're talking about The Girl I Left Behind, Now I Know, Can't You See, right? Say You, Give Love a Try.
And hold on, that is just one song
artist.
he wrote for Ken Booth alone, right? Because you want to look also, he wrote for Delroy Wilson.
Right, for Delroy Wilson, Give Love a Try, I'll Never Hurt You. We played Mashup Illiteracy before that.
He wrote for the Uniques with Slim Smith.
People Get Ready to Do the Rocksteady, Let Me Go Girl. For the Melodians, Swing and Dine and Personally Speaking. For Dennis Brown, Africa We Want to Go and Funny Feeling. So, and we're going to touch all of those songs. We're going to give you a little taste.
Remember, all of this is just to demonstrate the kind of depth and remember the level of the songs. I guess this, when we hear people criticize where the music is currently, in terms of, the tendency towards lewdness and so on, I guess listening to a catalog like Seaton's makes, it gives credence to the argument that the music, it has kind of sort of slipped, if you will. But the truth is, music is dynamic. It's a reflection of what was happening at the time. And in the 1960s, early 1970s, there was a softer side of Jamaica. We never had the influences of, television wasn't as big an influence at the time.
And even then, it was very controlled.
Absolutely, and controlled from two levels. One, the content, and two, the amount of time. You never had 24-hour television.
No,
TV sign on at 6 o'clock in the evening, and by 10:30, 11 o'clock, it sign off. I think we'll go till almost 1 o'clock on a weekend. So you had an opportunity. The music was the preeminent, radio was the preeminent thing. And at the same time, too, guys like Seaton would have been writing with his eye on getting the music played on the radio airwaves. Remember, you were competing with a lot of music coming out of North America, the UK to a lesser extent, which would have been featured, and we talked about them you know, the Tommy Edwards, the Jim Reeves and Skeeter Davis, etc., etc.
Right.
You know, so those were some of the downsides, but it also influenced how the writer would have crafted the song, because he was crafting for a wider audience. I see where Paul Campbell is trying to send me a little message here. I know you have something lined up, Garth, and as you do that, let me just see what Paul Campbell he was making a point here that My Jamaican Girl was written by B.B. Seaton, but he went further. He said that particular song was to show you the impact that the song had. That song has been performed by 22 other singers, right? So it gives you and the song itself is featured on some 47 albums, right? You know, so all these compilations. So it just goes to show the significance of the music. But over to you, boss.
Yes, I'm going to just run through a couple of Ken Booth's, Girl I Left Behind, Now I Know, Can't You See, Say You. And let's start off with The Girl I Left Behind. Yeah, you heard Personally Speaking, and before that was Swing and Dine, Slim Smith, People Get Ready to Do Rocksteady, and Let Me Go Girl.
Again, we talk about 1967-68. Swing and Dine is a 68 tune.
Yeah, man.
And this was again the point where, in my opinion, Jamaican music, certainly the rocksteady era of Jamaican music, was at its high point. There were so many different, strong singing groups, as well as you had a couple of solo performers. But mostly, we were dealing with the groups, the Heptones, the Melodians, the Uniques, Pat Kelly group there, the Techniques. And of course, they were taking the cue from what was going on in the North American scene. The Clarendonians, absolutely.
Of course, the gay lads.
So it was the era of the groups, but because the music was so rich, it forced writers like the same B.B. Seaton here to literally sharpen in pencil, because if you give one artist a tune that becomes a big tune, the other artists who coming out
they want a big tune
need something that is going to be a big tune as well. And so with all these groups and the kind of competition that was going on between the groups, because go back to the time, Techniques had some of the biggest vocalists at the time, right? Then you have on the other side, you have the Uniques with Slim Smith. You had the Clarendonians, we talked about them. You have, Tommy Cowan's group, the Jamaicans. Right. You had, don't forget, you had the Maytals, right?
Yeah, the Wailers.
You have the Wailers too, who was always in there. You have the Chosen Few. I think Chosen Few was more...
That was Derek Harriott and...
The Chrysalites was Derek Harriott's group. So everybody was in this
there were
competitive...
a couple of duos too.
Eras, but it was mostly the big groups.
Four or more.
And then remember, Alton Ellis was singing with a group called the Fabulous Flames.
Fabulous Flames, yes.
So you can just imagine when you go to like a stage show, like somewhere Carib, because the stage show venues were Carib, State, and Regal Theatre. And you go to a stage show and Techniques run, and then Uniques come through. And then you have the Wailers, and then you have the Gay Lads. By the time you got the first 2 or 3 acts, you want to go outside and pay and come back in again. Because that is how rich the offerings were. But it spoke to what was happening in that 1970s era. If you remember to...
1960s.
The 1960s. If you remember to... Maytals had done this song, Pressure Drop, which featured in the Harder They Come movie. And that movie came out of that era because that movie was really showing you what the conditions were that was, throwing up all of these musicians. This was the era where everybody seemed to want to, but all the youth them who was trying to make it, they were running to the music. And so Seaton would have had a target-rich area in terms of vocalists who was available, who could have carried a tune, plus to the singing competitions, which was turning out all of these vocal talents. So, you have to give this man his due, and at the same time, he was still, because I think the gay lads had kind of trimmed down from a trio to a duo with himself and Delano Stewart. So, they were still putting out a little bit of music, but by and large, he was also watering his own solo career, and we're going to touch on that. But he had done some music with Dennis Brown, right? A couple of tunes, which I'm sure you're going to feature that.
Yeah, we're going to... Let me tell you something, Richie. No, there's a saying now that Slapway, this BBC, what he's done, Slapway. This man thing, him footprint, him handprint, him fingerprint, trust me, the amount of lives he's touched, the depth of his music, when you listen to his writing, the lyrical construction, it really, really, really is deep.
Let me just add to your point, the point you just raised there, Garth. Just to give the listeners and the viewers an idea of the depth of BBC Seaton's credentials. In 1964, or between 1964 and 1968, he served as the A&R manager for Studio One Records. And of course, in the course of that time, he would have auditioned and opened the gate for people like the Heptones, the Melodians. He also would have auditioned people like Fred Locke, 7 Miles of Black Star Liner, Lloyd Parks, when he was a member of the group called the Termites. It was he, I'm told, who introduced Jackie Mittoo as a pianist to Clement Dodd and Studio One, and we know how much Jackie Mittoo's contribution enriched the Studio One catalog. He was also the A&R man for Randy's Records, which that was between 1968 and 1969. Of course, Randy's Records went on to become the venerable VP Records as it is today, operating out of New York largely and here in South Florida. He was the A&R man for Beverly's Records, which was the Hookim brothers. And no, Hookim would have been the Channel One thing.
Bless the Kong.
The Kong brothers. Yes. And this was between 1970 and 1971. He was also A&R man for Tip Top Records between 1972 and 74.
Pottinger.
That would have been Sonia Pottinger. And also again for Sonia Pottinger as Treasure Isle Records, 1975 to 79. So just to give you a kind of background or a foundation to the opportunity, the positions he operated in with as far as the music business was concerned, which would have led him to having had such a significant footprint on the Jamaican music industry. In 1984, he held the position of Vice President of the Jamaica Federation of Musicians. He was also part of the Prime Minister's Performing Arts Committee of 1984 and was also on the Jamaica Festival Committee in 1985.
Hi there. If you enjoyed that clip, go on over to our website at yawdmedia.com where you can watch the entire broadcast at your leisure. And while you're there, why don't you check out our other reggae music features? And before you leave, pick up some of our Jamaican reggae merchandise, and hey, don't forget to tell your friends.